This house will never be yours while I'm breathing. She smiled like she'd already won.
You're watching True Drama Tales, bringing you original stories. Enjoy the show.
The locksmith's van was parked crooked across my driveway, back bumper hanging over the flower bed I had planted the spring before with my own 2 hands. And I sat in my car for a second just looking at it, trying to make it make sense. I had been on my feet for 12 hours. I still had someone else's blood on my sneakers, dried into the white part where the laces cross. I was thinking about a shower and a glass of wine and maybe 40 minutes of silence before Emma got home from her friend's house. And instead, I was looking at a stranger in a company polo shirt kneeling in front of my own front door with a drill in his hand. My mother-in-law was standing behind him in the doorway, holding a bowl of fruit like she'd lived there her whole life, which, as I would find out in the next 6 minutes, was closer to the truth than I understood. "Diane," I said, getting out of the car slower than I meant to, "what is this?" "Oh, good, you're home," she said, like I'd walked in on nothing at all. Like the man in my doorway was rearranging furniture and not rekeying my house. "We're just updating the locks. The old ones were sticking." "The locks were fine 3 days ago." "Well," she adjusted the bowl of fruit against her hip, "things change." I looked at the locksmith. He didn't look up. "Ryan," I called into the house, past her, past the fruit bowl, past 6 years of small, polite tension that had just, in one afternoon, stopped being either small or polite. "Ryan, can you come out here?" There was a pause, a long one. The kind of pause where you already know the answer isn't going to be the one you want. "He knows," Diane said. "I already talked to him. He agreed this is the way it has to be for now." 4 words did something to my stomach that no 12-hour shift ever had. For now. Like there was a plan. Like I was the only one in the house who hadn't been told about it. "I already called the bank too," she added, almost gently, the way you'd tell a child something disappointing about Santa Claus. "You're not actually on the deed the way you think you are, sweetheart. Haven't been for a while." She said it the way you'd mention the weather. She said it like she'd been waiting a long time to say it out loud. I didn't answer her. I walked past her, past the bowl of fruit, into my own kitchen. And I stood there for a second with my hand flat on the counter, breathing. Doing the thing they teach you to do in the ER when a patient's numbers are dropping, and you need one clear second before you move. I didn't know yet how far back this went. I didn't know about the notary, or the refinance, or the fall that wasn't really a fall. All I knew, standing in my kitchen with dried blood on my shoes that weren't mine, was that somewhere in the last 6 years, in a house I thought was mine, somebody had signed my name to something, and it wasn't me. To understand how a woman ends up locked out of her own kitchen, you have to go back to a hospital gala in Dayton, Ohio, 6 years before any of this. Back before Diane, back before the deed, back before I knew that a mother-in-law could be more dangerous than any drunk driver I'd ever stitched up on a Friday night shift. I grew up 40 minutes outside the city, one of 3 kids. My dad drove a delivery route for a beverage company, and my mom did the books for a dentist's office. And nobody in my family had ever owned more than one house at a time or worried about which fork to use. I became a nurse because my grandmother spent 6 weeks in the ICU when I was 19, and the night nurse who looked after her, a woman named Pam, was the calmest, most solid person I had ever seen in a crisis, and I wanted to be that for somebody someday. Ryan Dawson was a pharmaceutical rep who showed up at a hospital fundraiser in a suit that fit too well for a man his age, and he made a joke about the shrimp cocktail that actually made me laugh, which almost never happens at those things. He was easy. He was warm. He listened when I talked, which after 3 years of dating men who mostly wanted an audience, felt like winning something. Ryan Dawson was a pharmaceutical rep who showed up at a hospital fundraiser in a suit that fit too well for a man his age. And he made a joke about the shrimp cocktail that actually made me laugh, which almost never happens at those things. He was easy. He was warm. He listened when I talked, which, after 3 years of dating men who mostly wanted an audience, felt like winning something. His father, Frank, had died 2 years before I met Ryan, left behind a modest real estate portfolio and a widow who had never once in her entire adult life had to make a decision without a man's name attached to it. That was Diane. 61 years old when I met her, sharp as a paring knife, and from the very first Thanksgiving, cold to me in a way she never quite let Ryan see. "She's not cold," Ryan told me once, early on, defending her the way he always would defend her. "She just takes a while to warm up." Diane never warmed up. She just got better at hiding the temperature. 61 years old when I met her, sharp as a paring knife, and from the very first Thanksgiving, cold to me in a way she never quite let Ryan see. "She's not cold," Ryan told me once, early on, defending her the way he always would defend her. "She just takes a while to warm up." Diane never warmed up. She just got better at hiding the temperature. We got married 3 years after we met. Small ceremony, her sitting in the front row in a beige suit, like she was attending a business meeting she disapproved of. For a wedding gift, she gave us $40,000 toward a down payment. And I remember being grateful, genuinely grateful. The kind of grateful that makes you overlook a lot of small things later. Ryan and I bought a 4-bedroom colonial on Maple Crest Lane. Good school district, a yard big enough for the dog we didn't have yet, a kitchen island I picked out myself from a showroom in Columbus. For 2 years, it was ours. Genuinely, simply ours. Emma was born. I went back to the ER 3 nights a week. Ryan sold his territory quotas and got promoted twice. Diane came for Sunday dinners and criticized my green bean casserole, and told me more than once that in her day, women didn't work nights when they had small children. And I let it go, every single time. Because that's what you do. You let the small things go so the marriage has room to breathe. I let 3 years of small things go. I didn't know yet that somewhere in that pile of things I was letting go, one of them had my name signed to a document I had never seen in my life. The fall happened on a Tuesday in March, in Diane's own condo, in her own bathroom. And for the first 48 hours, I felt nothing but plain, uncomplicated worry, the kind you'd feel for anyone's mother. She'd slipped getting out of the shower, hairline fracture in her hip, nothing surgical, but enough that the doctor wanted 6 to 8 weeks of limited mobility and somebody nearby. Ryan didn't even ask me. He just came home from the hospital that first night and said, quietly, like it was already decided, "She's gonna stay with us for a little while, just until she's back on her feet." I said, "Of course. What else do you say?" We set her up in the guest room downstairs, the one with the good light, the one I'd always pictured as an office someday. Within a week, there was a shower chair in our only downstairs bathroom, and a walker parked by the stairs, like a piece of furniture we'd always owned. Within 2 weeks, Diane had reorganized my spice cabinet alphabetically and told me, without being asked, that my paprika was expired. "Just until she's back on her feet," Ryan said again, at the 6-week mark, when the doctor cleared her for normal activity, and she somehow didn't move out. "She seems back on her feet to me," I said. "She reorganized the garage yesterday." "She's still healing," Ryan said, not looking at me. "It's complicated." I want to be honest about something. For a while, I told myself it was fine. I told myself this was what family did. This was the price of being married to a good man, a man who checked on his mother, a man who didn't abandon people. I told myself a lot of things during those months. The way you tell yourself things about a slow leak in a tire, right up until the morning you're stranded on the shoulder of the highway. What I didn't tell myself, because I genuinely hadn't put it together yet, was that 6 weeks after Diane moved in, a folder appeared in a locked drawer in Ryan's home office that I had never seen before. I noticed it because I was looking for the stapler. I didn't open it. I had no reason to open it. She was his mother. It was probably medical paperwork, insurance forms, the ordinary debris of an aging parent's life. It wasn't medical paperwork. I just didn't know that yet. By summer, the small erosions had a rhythm to them, the way water finds the same groove in stone every single day, until one day there's a canyon, and you can't remember the stone ever being flat. Diane started doing the grocery shopping to help out, which meant our pantry filled up with the brands she liked, and my daughter's favorite cereal disappeared without explanation. She started answering the landline, which we barely used, but somehow she was always the one to pick it up, always the one relaying messages a beat too late, or not at all. She started correcting Emma's manners at the dinner table, in a voice just quiet enough that I couldn't reasonably make a scene about it. "A lady doesn't reach across the table, sweetheart," she'd say. And Emma, 8 years old, would look at me with a question in her eyes that I didn't always know how to answer, because saying something felt like starting a war, and saying nothing felt like losing one slowly. She started, one Tuesday in June, asking Ryan for the login to our joint checking account, just to help pay a few of my own bills online since I'm here anyway. And Ryan gave it to her without asking me, because by that point, asking me had become optional in a way that made my chest tight every time I noticed it. I brought it up once, carefully, at 11 at night in our bedroom with the door closed, because that had become the only place conversations like that happened. "She has access to our account, Ryan. It's temporary. She's careful with money. That's not the point." "What is the point?" he said, and there was an edge in his voice I wasn't used to, a tiredness that made him sound older than 36. "She's my mother. She just had a hip fracture. I don't have the energy to fight both of you." Both of you. Like I was the second front in a war he was already losing somewhere else. I let it go. Again, I want you to understand that I am not proud of how many times I let it go, but I also want you to understand something about the version of me who kept letting it go. She was working 3 12-hour shifts a week in an emergency room where people's lives fell apart in real time. She was raising an 8-year-old, and she genuinely believed, right up until the locksmith showed up in her driveway, that the worst thing happening in her house was a difficult mother-in-law who would eventually move back to her own condo. She had no idea there was a folder in a locked drawer with her name signed on something she had never touched. She had no idea the fall in March hadn't been quite as simple as a wet bathroom floor. She just kept letting the small things go, the way you let a slow tire leak go, because you're busy and the tire still looks round, and nobody has told you yet that you're already driving on the rim. The first crack came from an envelope, of all things, the most boring possible source for the beginning of the worst year of my life. It was addressed to Diane R. Dawson, at our address, from the county recorder's office. Not unusual on its own. People redirect mail all the time when they're staying somewhere for a while. But something about seeing my own street number next to her middle initial made my stomach do a small, quiet flip that I didn't have a name for yet. I didn't open it. It wasn't mine to open. I set it on the hall table where mail went, and I would have forgotten about it entirely, except that 2 days later, I saw the same return address on a second letter. This one actually addressed to me, and this one I did open, because it had my name on it. It was a notice about our escrow account, a routine annual statement. I almost didn't read past the first paragraph. But nurses read fast, and they read for the thing that doesn't fit, the lab value that's slightly off, the vital sign that doesn't match the story the patient is telling you. And about halfway down the page, in the section listing parties on the loan, there were 2 names. Ryan Michael Dawson. Diane Ruth Dawson. Not Claire Dawson, not me. Diane. I read it 4 times, standing in my own hallway. The way you read something twice, hoping the second time it'll say something different. And it never does. I told myself there were 100 boring explanations. A clerical error, an old document that hadn't been updated, some leftover paperwork from when Diane's wedding gift went toward the down payment 6 years before. I told myself this the way you tell yourself the chest pain is probably just heartburn, right up until the moment you can't tell yourself that anymore. I didn't say anything to Ryan that night. I didn't say anything the next night either. Instead, I did something I am not entirely proud of and would do again in a heartbeat. I waited until Diane took Emma to her Wednesday swim lesson, and I went into Ryan's home office and I opened the locked drawer with the spare key I'd found in the junk drawer 18 months earlier and never told him I knew about. The folder was right where I'd noticed it back in the spring. Inside it was a copy of a refinance document from 6 years ago, the same year we bought the house, the same year Diane gave us the $40,000. My name was on the signature line, Claire M. Dawson. My handwriting, or something close enough to fool anyone who wasn't me. I have signed my name probably 40,000 times in my life. I know exactly how the C curls. I know exactly how the loop on the D drags a little to the left because of an old wrist injury from softball in high school. This signature didn't drag left. This signature wasn't mine. I confronted Ryan on a Thursday in the garage because it was the one room in the house Diane never went into. And by that point, I had started keeping a mental map of rooms she didn't occupy, which tells you something about what our house had become. I put the document on the workbench between us like evidence, because that's what it was. "Explain this to me," I said. "Explain why my name is on a document I have never signed, never seen, and never heard about until 3 days ago." Ryan looked at the paper for a long time before he looked at me. That was the first thing that told me he already knew. A man who's genuinely confused looks at you first, asking with his face before his mouth catches up. Ryan looked at the paper. "It was 6 years ago," he said finally. "We were drowning, Claire. The wedding, the down payment, your student loans, my student loans. My mom offered to help refinance some of it into a better rate. And there was paperwork, a lot of paperwork. And I signed where it needed a signature. That's the definition of forgery, Ryan." He didn't argue with that. He just stood there in the garage, under the fluorescent light that had been flickering for 2 years that neither of us had gotten around to fixing. And he looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for so long that setting it down almost made him more tired, not less. "Does your mother own part of this house?" I said. Slow. Careful. The way you ask a patient if they've been taking their medication when you already suspect the answer. "I don't know the exact terms," he said. And something about that answer, the vagueness of it, the way a grown man who had signed away part of his own wife's house couldn't say with a straight face exactly what he'd signed, made me colder than any direct confession could have. "You don't know?" I repeated. "She said it was to protect us, in case something happened to me. Tax reasons. I didn't read every page, Claire. It was 15 years of paperwork my mom's lawyer put together, and I trusted her." You trusted her more than you trusted telling your wife you'd signed her name to a legal document? He didn't have an answer for that. Neither of us said anything for a while. Somewhere above us, I could hear Diane's footsteps on the kitchen floor. Unbothered, ordinary, a woman making herself a cup of tea in a house she apparently believed, at least in part, already belonged to her. I need to see every page, I said. Tonight. Ryan nodded, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, he looked like a man who was actually afraid of what he'd find, instead of a man who'd stopped looking a long time ago. The papers Ryan finally dug out of a storage box in the attic that night filled most of a manila folder, and none of them made sense to either of us. Not really. Not the way they needed to. There were references to a limited power of attorney I had never signed. There was a notarized signature page with a stamp from a notary public named Walter T. Kessler, license number printed neatly at the bottom, like it meant something official and trustworthy, which, as I would learn, it absolutely did not. I called my friend Maya the next morning before my shift. Maya and I had gone through nursing school together at the same community college before she got tired of the night shifts and went back for a paralegal certificate. And now she worked at a family law firm downtown doing exactly the kind of document review that made my stomach hurt just looking at it. "Send me photos of everything," she said. "Every page. Don't tell your husband's mother anything is happening. Not yet." I sat in the hospital parking lot before my shift and photographed 15 pages on my phone, hands steadier than they had any right to be, and I sent them to Maya. And then I went inside and spent 12 hours keeping other people's hearts beating, while my own personal disaster sat quietly in a folder on my friend's desk, waiting to be read properly. She called me the next evening while I was folding laundry in the basement, the one room Diane also didn't come into because the stairs still bothered her hip, or so she claimed. "Claire," Maya said, and her voice had a tone I didn't like, the professional flatness people use right before they tell you something is worse than you thought. "This notary." Before I could even process what Maya had said about her aunt, before I even had the chance to ask a single follow-up question, something else happened that knocked the whole thing sideways, the way these things do, always at the worst possible moment. I was going through the shared family iPad 2 nights later, looking up Emma's soccer schedule, when a text notification popped up on the screen from an account I didn't recognize, synced somehow through an old cloud backup none of us had bothered to clean out in years. "Usual spot, 2 o'clock, it said. "Bring the folder this time." My first thought, the ugly, instant animal thought before the rational one caught up, was Ryan. An affair. A hotel. A whole second life hiding behind a mother-in-law who'd been the perfect distraction the entire time. I sat on the edge of our bed with the iPad in my lap and felt something crack open in my chest that had nothing to do with deeds or documents, something older and simpler and uglier. The specific betrayal of thinking you know exactly what a person is capable of and finding out you were wrong in the worst direction. I scrolled back through the thread. There were half a dozen messages over the past month. Usual spot. The paperwork's almost ready. Don't tell her yet. My hands were shaking by the third one. I checked the credit card statement next, the joint one. the one Diane had gotten temporary access to back in June. And there it was, a charge from a diner off Route 9, a place called the Copper Kettle, 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, the same day as one of the texts.
I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to Ryan, who slept the untroubled sleep of a man who genuinely had no idea what I'd found. And I stared at the ceiling and built an entire second marriage in my head, an entire secret life, brick by brick, the way you do at 3 in the morning when the only company you have is your own worst imagination.
I was so sure. I would have bet the house on it. I would learn less than 48 hours later that I had never been more wrong about anything in my life, and that the truth was somehow both a relief and something much darker. I did something on my next day off that I still can't fully explain, except to say that 12 years of ER work teaches you to walk toward the thing that's bleeding instead of away from it. I drove to the Copper Kettle at 1:45 on a Tuesday, and I sat in my car across the street with a coffee going cold in the cup holder, watching the door, feeling like a character in someone else's terrible daytime drama, waiting to catch my husband with another woman. At exactly 2 o'clock, a car pulled into the lot. Not Ryan's car, Diane's. She got out slowly, favoring the hip that was supposedly still healing, and walked inside. And I sat there for a full minute just processing the wrong shape of the whole thing before I got out of my own car and followed her in, because at that point I had stopped caring about being subtle. She was already seated in a booth across from a man I'd never seen before. 60s, cardigan, the kind of face that looks perfectly ordinary and trustworthy right up until you know what he's actually done. And there was a folder on the table between them.
"Claire," Diane said, and for the first time since I'd known her, she actually looked afraid. "Walter Kessler," I said, because Maya had shown me his notary stamp enough times over the last 2 days that I recognized the name on the little embroidered patch on his cardigan pocket before he'd said a word.
I know who you are. The relief that it wasn't an affair lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then it curdled into something worse, because an affair would have been simpler. An affair would have just been a marriage falling apart the ordinary way. This was something with a folder and a plan and a pattern. And Maya's voice was still in my head from 2 nights before. The one who lost her house. "I think," I said, sliding into the booth next to Diane before either of them could stop me, "you're both going to explain to me exactly what's in that folder right now, or I make a phone call from this table that neither of you is going to enjoy." Maya told me the rest of it over coffee at her own kitchen table 2 days later, and it filled in the shape of something I had genuinely not seen coming, not even after the diner, not even after the folder Diane had reluctantly let me look at with her hands trembling around her water glass. Her aunt, a woman named Ruth Ann, had been a widow in her 70s, sharp-minded but trusting, the kind of woman who still balanced her checkbook by hand and believed a handshake meant something. 2 years before, a family friend had connected her with a notary who specialized in helping seniors simplify their estate planning. That notary was Walter Kessler. Over 8 months, Kessler had helped Ruth Ann sign a series of documents she didn't fully understand, small print stacked on small print, until a limited power of attorney quietly became something closer to a transfer of property rights, all of it wrapped in language about protecting her from future medical costs, all of it notarized and legal-looking and completely devastating. By the time anyone in the family noticed, Ruth Ann had lost partial ownership of a house she'd lived in for 40 years, and the money from a subsequent refinance had disappeared into an account nobody in the family could trace. "We couldn't prove intent," Maya said. "That's the thing about people like him. Everything's technically signed. Everything's technically notarized. You need a pattern to prove fraud, not just one bad document." "And now you have a pattern," I said. Maya looked at me for a long moment. "Now I have a pattern." What Diane had reluctantly admitted at the diner, once she understood exactly how much trouble she was actually in, was that Kessler had approached her not long after Frank died, 5 years before any of this, offering to help her protect the family's assets in a way that, over time, had somehow also come to include a piece of her son's house. She swore, sitting in that booth with her hands shaking, that she hadn't understood at first how far it had gone. I believed about half of that. What I did not believe, not for 1 second, was the story about the fall. Because once I started pulling the thread, I found a text from Kessler dated the week before Diane's accident. It said simply, "If we're doing this the way we discussed, you need to be inside that house." The neighbor across the street from Diane's condo was a retired school teacher named Mrs. Okafor, who had lived there for 11 years and had, as it turned out, one of those newer video doorbells that saved footage to the cloud for 30 days. Maya found her through the condo association records and asked, gently, professionally, whether she'd be willing to check her archived footage from the week of the fall. Mrs. Okafor, it turned out, had been suspicious herself. That car was parked outside her unit 3 times that week, she told us over the phone, on speaker in Maya's office, while I sat with my hands wrapped around a coffee cup I wasn't drinking. A man in a cardigan, same car every time. And the morning of the fall, I remember thinking it was strange, because I saw her walking out to get her mail that morning just fine. No limp, nothing wrong with her at all. The footage, once Mrs. Okafor sent it over, showed Diane at 8:15 that morning, moving easily, checking her mailbox, chatting briefly with another neighbor. The ambulance was called at 11:40. We never got definitive proof of exactly what happened in those 3 hours, and honestly, by that point, I'd stopped needing it. What I needed was for Ryan to see what I was seeing, in one place, all at once, because I had started to understand that the only way any of this got fixed was if he stopped protecting his mother's version of events and started looking at the actual evidence sitting on our kitchen table. I laid it all out for him on a Sunday night after Emma was asleep. The forged signature, the refinance documents, Walter Kessler's history with Maya's aunt, the texts about the folder, the doorbell footage showing his mother walking just fine hours before an accident that had somehow, conveniently, put her inside our house right when Kessler needed her there. Ryan didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat at the table with his hands flat on either side of the folder, the same posture he'd had in the garage weeks before, except now there was nothing left to be vague about. "I need you to hear something," I said, and I set my phone on the table between us and pressed play on a recording I'd made 3 days earlier, hidden in Emma's old baby monitor, which I'd left running in the kitchen while Diane thought she was alone on a phone call with Kessler. Her voice came through clear. "If Ryan signs the new refinance, we cash out the equity before anyone else catches on. He trusts me more than he trusts her. He always has." Ryan's face, when he heard his mother say that sentence out loud, was the first honest thing I'd seen from him in months. What happened over the next 3 weeks moved faster than anything in the 2 years before it. The way a dam doesn't crack slowly, it holds and holds and holds, and then it's just gone all at once. Maya connected us with a real estate fraud attorney who specialized in exactly this kind of case: elder financial abuse tangled up with forged spousal signatures. And it turned out we weren't even the first family that attorney had represented against Walter Kessler specifically. There was, as Maya had suspected, a pattern, and patterns are the one thing people like Kessler can't talk their way out of. The attorney filed to have the fraudulent refinance documents voided, citing my forged signature and a handwriting analysis that took less than a day to confirm what I already knew. Kessler's notary license was referred for suspension pending investigation. A detective with the county fraud unit, a quiet, unhurried man named Detective Ferris, started making calls about the accident and about a pattern of falls and sudden refinances that had apparently followed Walter Kessler through at least 2 other families over the past 4 years. Diane, when she understood how much trouble she was actually in, stopped performing innocence and started negotiating instead, which told me everything about which version of her had been real the whole time. Ryan was the one who told her she had to move out, not me. I want that to be clear, because for a long time, I thought that moment would have to be mine, that I'd be the one standing in the doorway saying the hard thing while he stood behind me looking guilty. Instead, he stood in the kitchen in front of his mother and told her that whatever had happened 5 years ago, whatever excuses she had about protecting the family, she had forged his wife's name on a legal document and let a con man inside their marriage to do it, and she was not going to live in this house one more night. She left 2 days later, driven by her sister to a small apartment across town, and she has not, as of the writing of this, spoken to either of us since, though she did leave one voicemail for Emma on her birthday, which Ryan let play and which none of us have deleted. Because even now, none of us quite know what to do with the part of her that was, underneath everything, still somebody's grandmother. The locksmith came back to our house on a Saturday morning in October, 7 months after that first terrible afternoon, and this time, I was the one who called him. Ryan stood next to me on the porch while the new deadbolt went in. And neither of us said much, because by that point we had said almost everything there was to say, in a marriage counselor's office twice a week for 2 months, in late-night conversations that had stopped being about blame and started being about what came next. "I should have told you the moment she asked for the account access," he said, watching the locksmith work. "I should have told you 100 times before that. I kept thinking if I just handled it quietly, it would stay small." It didn't stay small. No, he said. It didn't. We had refinanced properly by then. My name on every page this time. My actual signature, the one with the loop that drags left, checked by an attorney I trusted before I signed a single thing. The equity Kessler and Diane had planned to cash out stayed exactly where it belonged. The house, for the first time in 6 years, was legally, fully, unambiguously ours. Emma asked once, a few weeks after Diane moved out, why Grandma didn't visit anymore. And Ryan and I gave her the careful, honest, age-appropriate version of the truth. The one about grown-ups sometimes making choices that hurt the people they love, and how sometimes loving someone means you still have to tell them no. I got exactly 1 new key made. I hung it on a hook by the door, and I didn't make a copy for anyone but Ryan. And when the locksmith handed it to me that Saturday morning, I stood in my own doorway and felt something settle in my chest that I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was something steadier than that. It was mine. They say a house is just 4 walls and a roof, and that the paperwork is only ever a formality standing behind the people who actually live there. They say blood is thicker than water, and that a mother will always, in the end, choose her son. And they also say the most dangerous person in your life is rarely the one you're bracing for. It's the one who's already inside your kitchen, holding a bowl of fruit, calling herself family, while somebody's signature dries on a page you were never shown. You decide.